My guest today is Jonathan Griebel. He's a principal scientist at Cargill, the largest privately held company in the US and the largest privately held food company in the world. Cargill's been in operation for 160 years, so it's a pretty incredible success story. So, Jonathan, why don't you take a minute and kind of talk about your background, how you got started with Cargill, and then maybe give a little bit of information about Cargill as a company as well.
So, as you mentioned, my name is Jonathan Griebel. I'm a principal food scientist at Cargill. I've been with Cargill on September 11th. It'll be 8 years. So I've worked mainly in what I call our prepared meals group. So that we do prepared meals for large companies such as Costco, Sam's Club, Kroger, and that. So prepared meals would be things like we have a red Thai chicken curry, beef stroganoff, beef burgundy, things like that. So sort of prepared meals. I work in the pipeline development area, so I'm working on ideas that are 1 to 3 years out. So it takes us obviously a while to kind of work on or get these ideas. So we have a group of very talented chefs that we work with that are internal. So they develop a gold standard for us. That's how we get started. And then I previously worked as a chef, so that's how I kind of got involved with the Research Chefs Association. So I started out my career as a chef. Actually, I worked for 15 years as a working chef. Started out my career working in large hotels. My passion was gourmet French cooking and buttercream and egg yolks and all that. And I realized that if I kept eating like that, I was going to be dead by age of 40. So I read Jane Brody's Nutrition Handbook, and I said, maybe I should eat a little bit more healthy and all that. So the last half of my career, I worked at a health club. Kind of got more interested in kind of more of a balanced approach, so a little bit of balance. So I believe my philosophy in life, there's no such thing as bad food, just bad quantity. So you can still eat. You can still eat butter, egg yolks, and cream. Just do it in moderation. So again, no such thing as bad food, just bad quantities and all that. So
No, I like that way of framing it. I talk about that a lot with my students as well, that, and also there are health implications of being orthorexic, right? So if you stress too much about it, it's going to be a lot worse for you than just being moderate in how you approach things.
my point exactly. I brought that up. I said the stress about worrying about whether the bad food of the week is going to kill you is far worse than eating. If you really have to have French fries fried in beef tallow, enjoy them, and then just do it in moderation, things like that. So while I was doing that, I actually went back and got my degree in food science, and I had seen an ad for. It was Pillsbury at the time, so Pillsbury Food Service. So I got a job working at Pillsbury at the time, and worked for Pillsbury. Started out in their food service division, and then I transferred to the international division. And I actually grew up overseas, so I was kind of returning to my passion of traveling internationally. So I got to travel the world on Pillsbury's dime and all that. So worked for Pillsbury. Then Pillsbury was acquired by General Mills in 2001. So I worked for Pillsbury/General Mills for 21 years, and worked in their meals division, kind of again working on pipeline development, working on new products. So got to work in a lot of interesting and fun brands such as Old El Paso, Haagen-Dazs. I worked in the Haagen-Dazs cafes area. I didn't work on the ice cream actually. I worked in Haagen-Dazs cafe. So I actually got to work with Pierre Humery, who was a very famous. You may have heard of him. He's Mr. Macaron, very famous French pastry chef. So we developed a line of pastries for the Haagen-Dazs cafes, Green Giant, and then I actually worked at a brand in China called Wan Chai Ferry, which was a line of dumplings we did in China. So I actually used a little bit of culinary arts and food science to take them from a handmade dumpling to a commercialized machine-made dumpling that was sold all over China now. So I think it's the number one brand in China right now and all that. So Madam Chung showed me how to make her handmade dumpling. So it's just actually the special fold that she put on it that was really critical to how she shaped her dumplings and all that.
So, Jonathan, what's the day-to-day kind of like for you working there as a principal food scientist?
So I have a kind of varied career. So what I talked about is kind of part of my job. So I work in the prepared meals. So I have kind of three major parts. So the part is pipeline development. So for some of our other food groups within the protein thing. So working on innovation. So I've been using a lot of artificial intelligence now to drive kind of ideation for for that group, and just it's a lot of fun because as I'm getting a little bit older, I kind of don't remember all the things that I I did back in my culinary days. So it's nice to kind of use the insights that we can do and building like using ChatGPT to kind of put all the insight information we have. And both Cargill and General Mills, we just had all these reams of data on the consumer and all that. Load that into ChatGPT and then marry that up with the culinary things and kind of put those two together. And also, we have these ideation sessions where we generate like 300 ideas, and then they always say, we're going to use those someday, but we never end up using them. So tapping into that data, putting that all into ChatGPT and have it turn out, and then asking it to develop new ideas based on consumer insights, work you've done in the past, and then what's kind of new and trendy out in the marketplace and all that. And it's amazing how quickly you can come up with new ideas. Some are good, some are bad. You still need the human in the room to kind of sort through them and say this makes sense for our consumer, this doesn't make sense, and all the consumers. It's not going to put anybody out of a job. It's just going to make our job a little bit easier and move a little bit faster. And then the third part of my job is, we hire a lot of food scientists and PhDs in food science and all that. A lot of them don't have the culinary skills that they need. So I've been involved in setting up culinary training for our food scientists. So we've partnered. So the main headquarters for Cargill is based in Minneapolis, but the headquarters for the protein group is based in Wichita. So I've partnered with Wichita Tech and then a local Hennepin Technical College here in Minneapolis to do culinary classes for our students so that they can get the certified culinary scientist certifications through the Research Chefs Association. So been quite successful at that. So it's amazing, those of us that are chefs when they come back and I had actually started this back in my General Mills days, and this guy he'd worked for General Mills for like 21 years, and he took the class and he came back one day and he said, I learned how to make roux today. And it was like, oh, really? That's kind of exciting. No, it's like, I kind of knew it was working when I was actually just helping serve the food at a major presentation that they were giving to the CEO of General Mills, and the VP gets up and he was talking about this and he says, yes, and now all our food scientists know about the 5 mother sauces and all that. And I'm going, they're kind of getting to understand that. We're not going to make gourmet chefs out of our food scientists, but if they can just kind of learn the basics. So as they talk to our, I mentioned, we work with our flavor or sauce supply companies. They can learn the basics of the mother sauces and kind of talk to the sauce suppliers and say, I need a Mornay sauce. They know what the basics of the Mornay sauce is. It'll just make everybody better at what they do and all that. So yeah, so that's important, and that's kind of how I got involved with the Research Chefs Association. I think that's been really important, and that's going to be, I guess, part of my legacy as I kind of move towards the twilight of my career. So
Yes. Yeah, so I'll put a link to the Research Chefs Association. And you mentioned AI, and at the last conference, I'm sure you probably saw the presentation about AI in
yep.
foods and companies. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit more because I use AI a lot, ChatGPT and other
Mm-hmm.
AI platforms as well. And as I'm sure you know, it's very flawed a lot of times in science. Like
Mm-hmm.
really basic stuff, it can get very wrong.
Yep.
Ideation is a great use for it because, ideas are just ideas.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just kind of curious your experience with it, and are you using it to help with recipe development as well? Or do you pretty much do that using other tools?
I use it mostly for idea generation, and I just also maybe for a little bit of formulation development. But as a
Hmm.
chef, you kind of know that I don't really, but for food scientists to allow them to kind of go in and say, you know, show me how to make a Mornay sauce or something like that, it can be very helpful.
Hmm.
But again, you still need that kind of uh, uh, chef slash somebody knows a little bit about food in the room, because it can
Hmm.
generate a lot of hallucinations and all that, and sometimes the answers are all wrong. So kind of to your point, it's fine if you're just generating ideas, and the idea can be totally wacky and all that, but you wouldn't want your brain surgeon,
Right.
going in there and say, how do I do a lobotomy again and all that, so
Yeah.
and all that, so for ideation. So and then actually I have an upcoming ideation session, so I said, well, how would you structure this ideation session, based on uh, some of the jobs to be done that we have coming up and like that? How would you structure it? So I kind of put that into there. I came up with a pretty good plan for using it. So and I think the key, obviously, as you well know, is kind of how to prompt it properly. And there's a lot of prompt engineering information out there. I have a system that I developed that I think is working pretty well. I'm not going to share it with you because it's quite proprietary.
Right.
It's kind of proprietary, but it's working pretty well. And I actually and my oxymoronic tip of the day is you prompt GPT to write the prompt that
Right.
that you want to do. So it's like you probably know that already. And so I fed my prompt into ChatGPT and I said, is this a pretty good prompt? And they said, yeah. And they asked me to change a few things around. So
No, that's a great suggestion, and I have also found that that's key.
yeah,
That you get to understand its limitations and the kinds of mistakes that it tends to make. And the other things, I've worked on really big, complicated projects with it that are difficult for it to handle. So having it be able to output a kind of a checklist that
yep,
here's what I need to kind of continue to do this is really helpful, so that you can kind of feed that back in
yeah,
every time you need to.
yeah.
And you mentioned gold standard recipes, and probably not everyone watching this may know what they are, but
Hmm.
basically, a chef will create a recipe like they would in a restaurant,
Hmm.
essentially. And then culinologists will take that and translate it to what's needed for production.
Right.
So, like making sure the pH is 4.6 or
Yeah.
lower, or, things like that. Um, Humectants and stabilizers and so forth for kind of long term. It's not going to be served immediately, so we need this to be shelf stable, or we
Right.
need it to not separate, or things like that. So is that something that you again do just with your culinology background? Do you involve AI in helping do those kinds of formulations when you're translating those recipes?
Yeah, that's actually how we start out. So again, I think we have 10 chefs across the Cargill, 8 to 10 chefs. So one's specifically dedicated to our team and all that. So we'll start with the gold standard recipe, and it'll come to me, with tablespoons and cups and all and all that, and more household ingredients and all that. And then my job is to kind of translate it. I translate his recipe into a formula that would kind of work from a processing standpoint. That would be, again, like I said, more stable, depending on the kind of processing it has to go through, whether it's, has to be thermostable, freeze thaw stable, things like that.
Mhm.
And that's something where my, knowledge of, and it's also beautiful that, Cargill is a major supplier of, starches and thickeners and things like that. So I can rely on those people also. That's the beauty of working for a large company. You can call up our starch technical expert and say, hey, I need something that'll stand up to, a low pH, uh, high shear, that, and you can just, you have the, access to those resources, which anybody else has too. You can just call up Cargill and we'll assist you as well. But I have almost instant access to those kind of people. So yeah, that's my role as a culinologist, where I can have both the culinary and the food science background to kind of be able to translate those recipes from a recipe, what I call a recipe, into a formula. So
Right. If you can shoot me an email with a list of names and phone numbers, then that'd be awesome. Okay.
and bank account numbers and PIN numbers, yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah,
just so I can.
yeah,
Hey, I'm working with starches today, and
yeah,
no, it must be awesome to be in a company that has that kind
yeah.
of knowledge and resources that's available to you.
No, but on the starchers and texturizers standpoint, we do have technical experts that can help you with any kind of issue whatsoever that you
Mhm.
have. So, and we have a wide range of solutions, and also like on cocoa chocolate, that kind of things. You're in
Mhm.
your own. You have your own chocolate business, right? Isn't it one?
I do.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but if you want a little bit more insight,
All right.
uh, a rising tide floats all boats, right? So,
Yeah, that is true. No, that's one really great thing, and that's one reason that I love the Research Association, is people are just so open and helpful to each other. And it really is amazing. It's a great community. I don't mean to do a plug here for the RCA, but it really is a fantastic
Yeah.
organization. And I've just had such a great experience with people and sharing information.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the people, like somebody that says, well, I'm not going to share my recipe with you. It's like, dude, some somewhere along early in your career, somebody showed you how to do something, and it's like, you know, it's ridiculous that you
Yeah.
won't, pass on that information.
And every recipe is built on the shoulders of other
Yeah.
people who, it's not like you've invented something completely
Yeah.
new.
Yeah. As Charles Darwin said, if I have seen further than others, it's only by standing on the shoulders of giants. So,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So for someone who wants to get into the kind of work that you do in culinology and food science, I'm kind of curious, what your experience has been in terms of, you talked a little bit about the education you went through,
Mhm.
but is the job what you expected it to be? Are there frustrations that you've had along the way that you've kind of had to learn? You know, maybe you came in a little idealistic about changing certain things and you realize it's really hard to do that with industry. And so you kind of do what you can.
Yeah, transitioning from being a chef, when I kind of called the shots and could make anything I wanted to, and people were just like, "Wow, that's really cool," and you were, I guess, a big fish in a small pond, and then
Mhm.
transitioning into Pillsbury, where I was a small fish in a big pond, it was like, "Oh, you mean I have to like do some testing?" And it was a little bit of a culture shock and all that. So, um, yeah, so I mean, both General Mills and Cargill are really, what we call it, insight-driven companies, and and, and hopefully my bosses don't see this interview and all that, but or the consumer insight people. But, it's like, they say you have to develop products that the consumers really want, and it's like, well, what do consumers really want? And we pretend we we pretend we can figure that out, and I forget what's the name of that author that won the Nobel Prize that proves that consumers are irrational, they make irrational choices, and he also proved that
Mhm.
that they don't really tell you what they say and what they do are two different things. And it's like,
Right.
and yet we keep asking them, like, how do you feel about this? What do you do about this? A great example of this was I was in a focus group behind the glass one time listening to these people, and this lady says, "Yeah, I really watch my sodium closely. I eat no more than 5 milligrams a day." And and all the marketing and CI people are writing that down. It's like, I said, do you guys know how much 5 milligrams a day is? It's like,
Yeah.
and I think at the same time, this lady said, I'm cutting back on sugar, so I only put marshmallow fluff into my desserts. And it's like, do you read that label? So yeah. So I think, oh, I think we need more of a balance of, and this is coming from a chef talking, more of a balance of insight and intuition driven consumer research, where you kind of like, I think they're gonna like this, and we spend a lot of upfront work on all this concept testing and jobs to be done and blah, blah, and all that, and it can be 6 months before we get anything in consumers' mouths and say, well, how do you feel about what do you think about the taste of the, and it's like, I always liken that to like if you went to an art museum and said, what do you think of this picture? I mean, I guess this lined up with the what do you think of this picture? Well, I can't really see it. It's like, yeah, we're asking consumers to make decisions on, on a food that's very tangible and visceral and all that, based on something written on a piece of paper and in words that people just kind of wordsmith together and may or may not be correct, so yeah, so I have a little bit of struggle with that, but that's the chef in
No,
me coming
that's
out.
that's always difficult. When I years ago, when I was more in technology, I worked at Apple, and one of the things I did, I did manage product development, and I ran focus groups.
Hmm.
And one thing we learned very quickly is that people don't really know what they want, and so
Right.
you have to really be careful how you frame the questions to them,
Yeah.
and asking, it's like, um, and your thing about sodium is perfect as well. Um, people are just really unaware of what they're really eating or what they're doing. I used to teach people how to drive on, racetracks and stuff, and people are like, "Oh yeah, around this turn I didn't lift at all." And then you look at the data of what they were actually doing is that they have like no clue what they actually did.
Yeah.
And that's with research and diet, that's really difficult as well because people don't remember what they eat, and even if they do remember, they're not really aware of what's in the food.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's really difficult to do that kind of thing. You really need to present them with things and, do triangle tests and so forth and really see what they like and
Yeah.
how they respond to things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that concept of the minimal viable product is just so valuable. I mean, we spend so much time kind of trying to refine the concept and the language and the positioning and all that, and then you get to the end and then you make the product, and the consumers are going, "What in the hell? I wouldn't eat that."
Yeah.
Put a product together, put it in front of consumers, then have them come back to you and say, "Oh, this isn't kind of what I expected. It should be blue, not yellow. It should be square, not
Right.
round, and all that." And have them, and then you can kind of develop it much, and then your rate of iteration can be so rapid because you can just kind of change it as you kind of go along. Especially if you have a chef in the room who knows how to
Hmm.
cook and manipulate and all that. So
Yeah, a lot of times it's just about setting expectations with people as well.
yeah,
Um, Heston Blumenthal um, was developing a new ice cream, and it was a savory ice cream, and it was like a salmon ice cream, if I remember correctly. And he had all these people trying it, and they tried it, and it was just like terrible. And it's like, why would you serve this? And then he changed the name to something like 463, or just something completely,
yeah,
random. And people loved it because
yeah,
they didn't have any preset expectations of
yeah,
what it was going to be. And so they weren't expecting to be something that turned out very different. And they were really open to what it was.
right, yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating world. And being able to kind of be in the thick of it must be pretty interesting, where you get
Yep,
to, I'm sure that there are constraints, where of what you can do and what projects are approved.
yeah,
But, just being able to get in there and do, especially with your chef background and being able to create these golden standard recipes and then convert them through to things that where you can have the same quality but better shelf life and
yeah,
everything else,
yeah,
and be able to actually deliver them to consumers.
yeah. And it's always a balancing act. We develop the gold standard recipes, and they're always going to have butter in them and
Hmm.
and the finest
Yeah.
ingredients and all that. And in the end, and that if you know your final customer, they're not going to be able to afford butter and all that. But if you start with the gold standard, and if you start with an A, you're probably, after you get done formulating and cost saving and all that, you're probably going to end up with the C. But
Hmm.
if you start with a C, you're never going to get to a really good
Right.
quality tasting product and all that. So you might as well start with an A and work your way down. It's like kind of like negotiating on a loan or something like that. If you
Right.
start too low, yeah, you're never going to get to the where you want to be.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah,
So do you like say, okay, so this is made with butter, so we're going to put diacetyl in and try to get, as close to that perception of better. And, your brain will fill in a lot of stuff that's
yeah,
not there in a lot of cases, right?
yeah.
So
It,
is
it,
that kind of the way that you approach it?
yeah, it kind of depends on obviously the customer. So if we're formulating for, a lot of companies have their no lists that we have to kind of work around like that. So it depends on that. So and obviously every customer has their price point. So for some customers we can deliver the A without any issues and all that, but some customers we have to. And I'm not gonna mention them on, but some we do have to. We are pretty much moving away from any kind of artificial flavors, and obviously artificial colors are pretty much out now, so
Right.
as well. So and
That's really interesting. The changes industry has made in some of those areas that,
yeah,
I mean, took a really long time, but they're finally, and in some cases it's great. In some cases it's really just consumer perception.
hmm
I was going to ask you also, I did an interview a while back with Chef Tanner, who's the executive director of the ACF. And one of the
hmm
things that we talked about, he also, worked professionally in food like you do, um, is I think he worked for Campbell's, for example, and using MSG in foods, there's such, especially, I think younger people less so, but people are still very kind of locked into negative feelings about MSG because they don't really understand what
Yeah.
it is. And he's basically said, there's no way that you can change these perceptions, and
No,
it's not even worth trying, right?
no,
So,
no. You'll drive yourself crazy. So yeah, and
yeah.
like I said from the same presentation at the end yesterday, all food is made up of chemicals. like,
Mhm.
like get over it. So it's like, and it kind of comes back to education. Like what
Mhm.
what website are you getting your information from? Are you getting it from Joe Schmo's blogosphere, who's
Right.
like like don't eat any seed oils, it's really bad, or high fructose corn syrup, or whatever. So pick your poison and all that. So
Yeah. And speaking of poisons, the dose makes the poison, right? So, in some cases, a little bit of poison might actually
yeah,
be good for you, right?
yep,
And it goes kind of back to what you're saying about moderation in foods. And there's a lot of stuff, like you talk about chemicals, and right, everything is chemicals, right? That's what makes up the world. So it's people, if there's something like disodium guanylate that they don't recognize, then this is a bad
mm-hmm,
thing, and I don't want it in my food. But if they really understand what it is,
yep,
and it's just a key molecule in biology that's like
yeah,
in all life, um, and we just happen to be you know extracting it from something, or using fermentation to make more of it or whatever, and using in foods, then I'm giving a talk at the ACF conference in a couple weeks about proteins and all this stuff,
mm-hmm,
and there's just a lot of misconception about a lot of these things, and there are things that and this is something I wanted to talk to you about as well, that food companies will take certain knowledge about how our biology works and how our appetite system works, and they'll use that to make foods that are more addictive, or that cause you to overeat certain, too much carbohydrates or fats or whatever. And part of that just has to do with what you were talking about with the cost of good proteins, the cost of
mm-hmm.
good, butter and things like that. Um, so I'm curious what it's like for you, especially with your background, when you are formulating foods that, maybe aren't as good for people as you'd like them to be, but, you know, the industry needs to be profitable, right? And it's all about selling, but you also want to try to do good in the world and to make the foods as healthful as possible.
Well, I mean, most of the stuff that tastes really, really good is kind of cheap, salt, sugar, fat.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm kind of a minimalist, so and it kind of gets back to flavor. I like I like to try to get the most amount of flavor with the fewest amount of ingredients, and I use the classic
Hmm.
example of pizza crust. Four ingredients: water, sugar,
Right.
or water, flour, salt, and yeast. Just to get in this nice 3-day fermentation, you can get really, really good tasting. Or you can take flour and add some fermentation flavors and blah 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 and all that, and you kind of
Hmm.
get pretty close. But and there's probably a word for this, but you taste something that has flavor added, and after you eat it, the flavor just kind of dissipates, and you don't kind of get that
Hmm.
lingering thing. But if you taste something really good, like a really good, well fermented pizza crust that's on a really good pizza, like 3 hours later, you still got that flavor in your mouth. You kind of crave it and all that. So it's like, wow, that was really good quality thing. So I think that's what's missing from a lot of industrially developed products is kind of
Hmm.
that good because we're always trying to push things through a little bit faster. Nobody's going to want to
Hmm.
ferment pizza crust for 3 days in their cooler and all that. So
Yeah, that's a great example. And I mean, there's a whole area of science where, like with artificial sweeteners, sugar has a particular sweetness profile,
yep,
right? How sweet it gets, how quickly, how it ramps off,
hmm
and all these other artificial sweeteners that we have different profiles. So
right,
although they taste sweet on our tongue, they taste off somehow. Like our brains, like, Wait a minute, something's not quite right about
yeah,
this." And pizza dough is a great example. And if it's fermented, really, it's only three ingredients, right? Because the yeast is built into the flour.
Yeah.
So super, super simple, but there are hundreds and hundreds of volatile molecules created as part of that process. It's
Yeah.
really complicated.
Yeah.
And to do that commercially, you just can't. There's no way you
Right.
could possibly create all those flavors and, all those aromas and so forth.
Yeah.
So, kind of if you can find a way to get back to something more natural and something that your brain is like, yeah, that's right.
That's right. Yeah.
Uh,
That's why I think a lot of, the fermentation flavors are so popular right now, like kimchi and I'm trying to think of some other things, that are really popular because you get those fermentations which develop all those, really nice tasty chemicals and again,
yeah,
chemicals, and I'm sure if you would
right.
put them through a mass spec and, identified exactly what they were, it would scare people off, but it's like, that's where all the flavor is, so.
Yeah, and it's all natural. And it doesn't just because something's natural doesn't mean it's necessarily good for you.
Right,
And just because something's created in a lab doesn't mean it's bad for you.
right, yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Are there any particular products that you've been really proud of?
Probably my biggest claim to fame. Back in my General Mills / Pillsbury days, I developed it's called the Old El Paso tortilla boat. It was a tortilla that was instead of flat, it was shaped like a boat. So instead of falling all apart when you made a burrito, it kind of held together and all that. So it took me about 3 to 4 years to develop that, and it was kind of complicated because it was both the physical. Physics probably, to get the expansion just right of the male and the female molds and all that, and also the chemical leavenings was a kind of a challenge. So using experimental design to get the chemical leavenings designed just right, and luckily this was back in my General Mills days, and they had a really nice machine shop, and he was really much smarter than I was around building the molds and all that. But it took me a good 3 years to get that development on that. But once we got it developed and launched, it was sold all over the world, and the former CEO of General Mills named it's one of the top inventions of all of General Mills. So I took along with Honey Nut Cheerios and the Middlings purifier. It's like, wow, that's kind of nice praise from the guy like that. So and then the other one I developed was it was just a plain simple brownie recipe that I developed, and it started out as we called them a tube set brownie. So it was a brownie that just came in a tube, so that the restaurant operator, all you had to do is just squeeze it out of this tube into a pan, and that was cool. But then they took that same recipe and it just kept getting resurrected, and made it for the military in big sheet pans, and then McDonald's launched it as one of their brownie cube projects, and then now it's being sold as little brownie bites and that. So that thing just kept getting the same formula kept getting resurrected. And I could always kind of tell because I looked at the ingredient deck on the back, and I remember just kind of that's my formula. So just did that thing. So that had like 5 lives that kind of kept coming back and all that. So. And then one thing I developed that I was like not really proud of, but like I can't believe they're eating this. I developed a shelf-stable guacamole. This is actually over in Europe. And I don't know if you know this, but if you heat avocados up, they just develop this incredibly rancid flavor and all that. And
Right.
so I developed a process around that, how to heat them up without getting that rancid flavor. I actually got a patent on that process, and but it still had kind of a strange flavor to it and all that.
You're trying to deactivate the polyphenol oxidase?
Yeah, yeah,
Is that your,
yeah. France just loved the flavor, and I was like, "You got to be kidding me!" So, because it still had a little bit of that in there.
I guess that goes back to expectations. And if you're
Yeah,
expecting it to taste like fresh avocado,
yeah,
it's not gonna be it. But if you're open to this as a new product, if it doesn't
yeah,
taste bad, or even,
yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of flavors that um, taste terrible, but in small doses, they're really important to the
yeah,
flavors that we expect in foods,
yeah,
right? So, isobaric acid or butyric acid, or, there's compounds in meats that are really foul smelling in large amounts, but if they're missing, then the meat just doesn't taste right.
yeah,
So I could see you formulating something that's, if your expectation isn't there, it could be interesting. And, especially, with fermented foods, there are so many flavors.
Yeah.
Look at natto, for example, and I like natto. When we went to Japan recently, I, ate as much as I could because it's hard to find good natto in the US. But for a lot of people, it's like, keep it away. And part of that's the textural as well. But it is interesting. I don't know why France would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe there's something in their gene pool that makes them less
Yeah, maybe.
susceptible. Yeah. So
That's awesome if you can be in a job where do this stuff and then you guys actually see it out in the real world. That's like, hey, I made that.
yeah.
That must be pretty
Yeah.
nice. So for someone who's interested in getting into the field of culinology or food science, do you have any advice for them? Both in terms of what education they should have to be really successful, and also what their expectations should be.
I would really say get a job in a restaurant. I think that really helped me. And one of the key things to learn is the concept of mise en place, learning how to work and kind of be organized about your work. Some of the scientists that I work with now, when they set up their workstations or something like that, they got stuff laying all over the place, and they haven't kind of got that organized thing like when you're working on a line and have to crank things out. You better be prepared, or you're not going to last very long. So kind of get that whole concept of mise en place into your kind of working schedule is really important like that. And so kind of, I mean, like I say, find something you do that you enjoy. You'll never work a day in your life. I mean, that's kind of the key thing. So I just enjoy, being around food and all that. I have a passion about it. Some of my earliest memories are around food, and I think I mentioned I grew up overseas, and I remember dipping deep fried yams into red hot pepper, and that flavor just kind of seared to my mind, and that's how I kind of got my interest in food and all that. So yeah, so find something, like I said, like you're passionate to do, and you'll find out in a hurry if you don't like like being around food, because if you're working a rush on a busy lunch hour, and you don't like that, get out of the food business, because you aren't going to be very happy. So. And then, my career path, I was lucky that I got to, go to finish my food science degree while I was, still being a chef. So it kind of worked out well for me. So that kind of did. And, always be learning, finding out from other people. And I think especially now, I mean, travel is really the key, learning about new experiences and all that, and learning about new cultures and that is just really a lot of fun and exciting and all that. So
What level of degree in food science is really expected?
generally a master's is, some places will still hire with bachelor's, but generally a master's is preferred. Kind of depends on what area you want to work in. If you want to do just pure research, you'd probably be looking at a PhD. But if you just want to do like new product development, a master's is almost kind of a. I know at General Mills they wouldn't hire you without a master's for food science.
All right, so you start off working in a kitchen, and then you get a master's degree, and then anything else that you think would really help prepare someone?
Um, I actually went back and got my MBA too, because
Oh,
it's a business, and if you don't understand the business side of it, you can make all the great product you want, but if you don't make product that's financially viable, you're not going to go very far. So again, understanding that it's really helpful as well. So it's nice to pick up a lot, understanding the business side of it. So, and also just kind of from working in a large corporation, it kind of helps to have the background. So yeah, I got more letters behind my name than I really need, but so
right. Letters are fun,
yeah,
I mean, even I found, even if you're working in kind of vaguely related fields, it's all really helpful, and the life experience you have, I think, is absolutely invaluable.
yeah,
And being able to come into this with a really strong background as a chef,
yeah,
and working for different companies like that, is just experience you can never get in school.
yeah. Yeah, I always say I learned more in my first 6 months as a working chef than the 2 years in culinary
Mhm.
school. So my first job as a chef was at the Hyatt Regency in Houston, Texas. It was a 1,000-room hotel. We had
Mhm.
banquets for up to 2,000, and and then 5 different restaurants. And boy, you learned a lot. Chefs from all over the world coming there, and yeah. So when it was time to crank out the banquets, everybody off the line and helping dish up the banquet, and it was just like crank it out. So it was a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
we just did a little, not quite at that level, but group of chefs just got together and we made, I don't know, 8 or 10,000 sandwiches for the Special Olympics. And it was just really a super organized assembly line. And it's great to work in an environment like that with people who are professionals and are just like really organized and everything just,
Yep.
yeah. So,
Yeah, we did steak and lobster one time for like 2,000 people, and it was just like, wow,
yeah,
a lot of fun.
that's kind of a lot.
Yeah, yeah. You better be organized, or you'll be fired.
Yeah. All right. So any last advice you have for people who are either already in culinology or interested in getting into it?
Stay curious. So, yeah, check out the Ma Pa restaurants. We have don't feel afraid to share. Yeah, so I've been very fortunate in my career.
Yeah, that really is what drives our industry forward is people working collaboratively and
Yeah,
sharing. And, there are going to be industry
yeah,
secrets, obviously. The chocolate world, the chocolate industry is so
yeah,
super secretive. And I mean, it's kind of crazy. Some of the stories, like with Mars and Hershey's and so
yeah.
forth. But yeah, but in the world that you work in, I think
Yeah.
things are a lot better.
One of the great things about Cargill, we're a part of this group called the Partners in Food Solutions, and it helps startups in
Hmm.
Africa, and so they ask you if you want to help, and you can kind of pick the projects you work on. So, and you help
Hmm.
little startups
That's
in
nice.
Africa. I've worked on a thermopouch bean project, and I'm working on a rice porridge project, and it's just kind of cool to be able to help small little entrepreneurial companies out there get started. So
Yeah.
it's a way to give back. So there's lots of ways, lots of opportunities to kind of give back to the world. So, and the world needs it a lot right now. So
Yes, it does, and that's super
I'll
important.
I'll, li- I'll leave it at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Never know who's watching, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
No, I agree. Giving back is super important, and like you say, the world really needs it. Our country needs it, and the whole world needs it. And so it's great that organizations like Cargill and lots of companies. Yeah, I found really in the chef world, there's so much charity and so much working together, and so many people really go out of their ways, whether it's just a very local community thing that they're helping out or
hmm
a more global thing. Um, it's wonderful. I mean, it's really,
yeah. To whom much is given, much is expected. So
yeah. Oh, well, Jonathan,
we've all been
thank you so
we've all
much
been
for
blessed by it.
taking the time out of your
You
day
bet.
to chat a little bit about this. I mean, it's fascinating field, and a lot of people are really interested in getting into food in that more kind of science side of it. So it's great to get to talk to someone who has such a long experience, both as a chef and also as a research scientist and food scientist. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Thanks. It's a great life.